What's up, everybody? We are back. I'm back here with Haley on Carnivore Experiment, and it's been a minute. It's been a little bit of a hiatus. How you been, Haley?
I've been good. We've been carnivore prepping for bodybuilding competitions, and it was just so chaotic. We took a hiatus from the podcast, but we're back consistently now.
Yes. So if you guys remember in the last couple episodes, Haley's been doing, this carnivore prep, which is leading to a bodybuilding show, bikini competition. And we have now done two of them. She has done two. Well, not me. I didn't throw a bikini on the past 2 weekends, but Haley sure did. And she went into her competitions. And we thought today what we would cover is just an in-depth overview of the prep, what it was like, physically, mentally, all those things, everything you guys probably missed out on hearing in the middle there, and also leading up to show result and everything in between. And we're going to be back regular with this podcast now, Haley, aren't we? Back on the
Yes.
normal rotation. So you guys, if you're new here
Yes.
and you want to learn more about carnivore, you want to learn more about how to be an athlete that is carnivore for bodybuilding or for other things, that's what we do. That's what this channel, that's what, this podcast is really all about. So, Haley, let's flash back for a minute and just go to, not start with the results of the weekend. I want everybody that's listening to hang out with us to hear, a little bit about this prep and how it went. Let's start actually with, how about the mega, I'll say downside of saying that you were going to do a carnivore prep, and the haters, the people out there, the mass
Yes.
amounts of people that said it was impossible. You got a ton of that, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. We both, I feel like we got a good amount of hate. I got, hate from people in person, online, clients even just being like, this is impossible.
Yeah.
You aren't going to look good. You're going to look flat. You're not going to have any shape on stage. You need carbs to pump the muscle before you step on stage. And there was also a lot of support. I think mainly I think the bulk of what we got was a lot of curiosity and like
Yeah.
hopefulness that it was possible. Because I think a lot of people follow like keto or carnivore for health reasons, but they want to still be an athlete. And there's nobody really doing that. Or the people who are doing it, it's a very small niche of people,
Yeah.
and maybe they're not easy to find or their platforms aren't that big. And so it's hard to be like, how do I eat the way that's best for my health, for my mental health, my autoimmune diseases, my XYZ, but I still want to compete. I still want to do all of these things. And because there are so few athletes doing it, we just got so much hate saying like, you can't do it. You're going to look bad. You're going to look flat on stage. You might be able to do fine, at a local show, but you'll never make it to nationals. You'll never go pro,
Yeah.
all of those things. So we get plenty of hate doing
Yeah.
carnivore and bodybuilding.
Yeah, and that's something I think I want to highlight even for those of you out here that are not athletes. I mean, you will if you decide to do a carnivore diet, you will contest a lot of people's theories. It's almost worse than politics at this point. If you want to be on a certain type of diet, all of a sudden everybody's got to come around and say something, and that is something that people run
Absolutely.
into, a lot, but especially on carnivore because, let's be frank, carnivore is very restrictive. It's a very niche type of diet. And for those that
Mm-hmm.
do it and can do it, it works amazingly. And there's a lot of great things that come with it. But the average everyday person doesn't really understand it. And, they get confused as to why you can't sit there and eat their birthday cake and have their cookies and have,
Yeah.
just eat normal, quote unquote, right? But realistically, when we talk about a carnivore diet, we're talking about a dietary choice that every human can make, right? Like everybody can pick their
Mm-hmm.
own diet. If you want to be carnivore, you want to be vegan, you want to be paleo, you want to eat macros, whatever you want to do, that's really your individual choice. And then, it comes to the point to say, you got to understand that if you make a dietary choice and you also, go out of your way in a sense, like we kind of did, to make sure people knew, hey, we're doing a bodybuilding prep, we're doing this and that, we're going to test
Yeah.
this out. I mean, the whole podcast point, the carnivore experiment, started with the idea that Haley was going to do an experiment, and that bled into then competing as a carnivore. But, those of you out there, I want to make it clear, if you're getting hate from people, you're getting even from your inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
people that are close to you telling you, hey, carnivore, don't do it, don't do this and that. Do what is working for you, okay? Ignore everybody else and just do what is working for you. And if that's carnivore, nobody can tell you different. Nobody should tell you different. And, you should be able to be confident in your own goals enough that you can stay on track. And it is obviously very difficult. Haley, I don't know if it contested your mindset at all. Did you ever consider, based on anything anyone was saying online, like, hey, maybe I should throw this in. Maybe I should take the towel out and just say I'm done. I'm going to go back to eating carbs. I'm not going to do the carnivore, bodybuilding. I'm not doing any of this anymore. Did that ever happen to you?
In prep, no. I would say that a lot of people would come up with people would say things that would spark bunny trails into me wanting to learn more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there were times where people would be like, you need carbs to fill up the muscle. And so then I would be like, Ryan, what do you think about this comment? Let's talk about it.
Yep.
Like, I'm still actively somebody who is learning a ton about being a carnivore athlete. It is still such a big experiment. That I would say is going very well for me, but still, it's not like I've ever done this before. It's still an experiment. So I never felt the desire to have carbs in prep. I would say my biggest question was I was always like, oh my gosh, how are we going to pump for stage? What's the plan? I hounded you a million times about it and it went great. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But no, I never had the desire to actually eat carbs on prep. I've done carb preps before, and there were very stark differences between a carnivore bodybuilding prep and a carb bodybuilding prep. And this one was significantly better for me in so many ways that there really was never any temptation to eat carbs. Like, I never had the desire. I never was like, oh my gosh, I want this cookie, or I'm making these things for my kids. I'm really tempted to have this. Whereas previous preps, I was very food focused because there were carbs in my diet and sugar still in my diet. I craved sugar like crazy. I wanted to binge on foods. And then after my shows, that even led to, spiraling and overeating, not hitting my reverses the way that I should, which we can go into that more and break that down. But long-winded answer to say no, I was never tempted to eat carbs on prep.
Yeah, and the reason I want to bring this up is because Haley has a very unique mindset. I've been training Haley a long time, and Haley works very well when people do shit like that. When people come out and they go out of their way to, try to she uses that as motivation. So
Yeah.
if you're not out there as those people that can do that, you got to kind of know yourself, right? And it might be worth something I've talked about before, and I don't think on this podcast, but you don't really need to go talk to people about your dietary choice. If you're doing a carnivore diet and you're getting hate on it and it's affecting your mindset, making you think that you need to go off or quit, or oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, don't tell people about it. Don't go into all of it, right? Like, remember, a dietary choice is just for you. And some people can do what Haley does and use it as motivation. Be like, okay, great. Well, I can't wait to compete and prove you wrong. But not everybody can do that. So you really got to know yourself and where you're at and be okay with the fact that if you do make a dietary choice, nobody should be able to tell you that is right or wrong in any of those senses. I mean, we all get to choose the things we do. And if you think about, even in the standard of just dietary choices around the world, people make dietary choices all the time that are debatably terrible, but it's seen as normal by society, right? And like, it's a weird thing to be the person at a party that doesn't decide to drink versus the person that is shit-faced drunk, right? Like, if you get into that zone, people think that's normal versus not. Now you're the weird, right? So, like, again, if you're on the journey trying to do a carnivore diet for whatever reason, health or wellness, or maybe you want to lose weight or whatever it is, you got to be able to keep a strong mindset, and that's something that we'll probably talk a lot about in this episode. But let's go into give me comparisons here, Haley, because we've done prep, and so let's highlight what prep is first. For those of you that don't know, basically in bikini division where Haley competes, it's about having muscle symmetry, muscle shape, size, proportion, and a certain level of conditioning, which means leanness. You got to be a certain level of lean. So it is not an average everyday type of physique. It is not an average everyday type of look. You have to train with weights. You got to build a certain ratios, and you need to be able to get lean. So a lot of the, kind of hate, if you will, we got about not being able to do this with carnivores because people believe that you have to have carbs in order to do this. And this is
Yeah.
pretty notoriously known in bodybuilding too. But that's because most bodybuilding coaches and most bodybuilders are kind of brainwashed in the sense of what they believe about, training, nutrition, and diet. But the point is, that's what really Haley had to do. However, it is pretty relevant for all of you out there to know that if you have a weight loss goal, there's going to be similarities. If you have a goal to build muscle, there's going to be similarities. If you have a goal to look a certain way, everything that we're going to say here might be in the context of Haley competing, but it's still very relevant for everybody out here listening, all of you. If you never want to compete, don't click out. Stay with us. We got a lot of stuff. And, you're going to have to see, did Haley actually pull off a carnivore prep or not? Did we actually be successful here? Were we? And you'll know by the end of the episode. So let's start, though, Haley, real quick. I want to go back to, actually not the carnivore prep, but the previous preps, because Haley's done this now several times. We have done how many shows now, Haley? Was this technically 4 now, right?
Yeah, I've done a total of 4 shows, one without Team Flex, back in 2017. And then my last
worst time.
Yeah. It was awful. It was so bad that I swore off bodybuilding for like Ryan tried to get me to do a show for like 5 years and I was like, I am good. And then finally we did the first show together. That one was with carbs with Ryan. And then we did these last 2 shows, carnivore.
Yep. Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit. So that was 2022, right? Was the previous competition, if I remember. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that, because we basically had to do the same thing. And that's what I was trying to highlight by telling people, hey, we had to get lean. You got to do this muscle. You got to do this and that. We still had to do all of the same things, but the path we chose was entirely different. So Haley still had to go train with weights. She still had to do cardio. She still had to follow some form of a diet. We had to do all that. That doesn't go away, carnivore or not. However, there's going to be some stark differences, I think, that we will find that Haley experienced. So thinking back to 2022 prep, Haley, I remember this time being a prep that was, I could say, very challenging in a lot of ways for you, right? Like physically, mentally, compliance-wise. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight from what you can remember. Granted, this is like years later now. But, what do you remember about that prep and that timeline?
Yeah, so that prep was hard. It was hard. For story's sake, these preps and that prep, so that everybody knows, like 2 variables that were the same was I was up in weight. I probably started both preps around 150, and then I had to diet down for the stage. Mm-hmm. So those preps were both the same in that sense, where I had to diet down from a really high body fat, try and build the muscle we could in that time frame, maintain the shape, step on stage, and hopefully do well, right? So in 2022, I had just had my second kid, or I was like a year out from, I had my second kid in 2021, stepped on stage a year later in 2022. And, this was your standard bodybuilding prep in the sense that like I had a high carb, low fat, moderate protein diet. And it was very hard. It was kind of what I experienced from my first prep in the sense that, you're restricting food. You're thinking a lot about the foods that you can't have. You're working to recomp your body, essentially burn body fat, build muscle. And for me mentally in that time, I was able to stay really restricted and follow the plan. I would say maybe like with a 90% accuracy. There were several times where I messaged Ryan, was like, I effed up. I didn't hit my cardio. I effed up. I binged and had like a whole package of M&Ms and I was not supposed to. We had these mental hurdles and these issues where there were like compliance issues to the programming. At the time, I would say I was giving 100% of what I could do. And my 100% was like 80% compliance to the program because I just mentally was not able to adhere to the level of strictness that is needed for successful bodybuilding competitions. Bodybuilding competitions are very hard. They're very extreme. It is a aesthetic competition where everything you do affects the way you look and you're trying to look a certain way on stage to win. And then after that show, it was very hard. I could not reverse out. What you're supposed to do is you diet down, you get down to restricted calories, you're have a high workout output to reach a level of leanness for the stage. And then you reverse out of that. So you step on stage, and then afterwards, you can't just go eat whatever you want. You've dieted down, your body's in an incredibly fragile state, and a good coach reverses you out. So Ryan was trying to reverse me out. I was ghosting him. I think I checked in like a month later, up like 20 pounds, eating whatever I wanted, everything in sight, had no self-control. If I wanted Dairy Queen, I went and drove and got Dairy Queen. If I wanted donuts, I was getting donuts. Like there was zero control. I was like very addicted to sugar, very food focused, and it was very hard for me to break out of that. In 2023, gained a ton of weight. And then that's why when we started prep again, I started at a heavier weight because 2023, which in previous podcasts I talk about, there are a lot of factors that played into why I gained so much weight and health things that I had dealt with at that time. But then that kind of, we started the carnivore prep at the same place where we're like, all right, got to lose a lot of weight again, got to try and maintain muscle, got to get ready for the stage. Let's do this. So that's kind of how that went. And that prep, I placed first in novice, which is kind of like an amateur division on stage. And then I placed third in open, which is kind of like the more, it's the class that you can rise the ranks in the sport in. So I didn't do too bad. But afterwards, I would say mentally, it was a really hard prep. And I had a lot of anxiety leading up to the show, and I did not have good habits after the show. So in that sense, the show, even though the placings were good, we did a good job on stage. My mental growth and my habits were not ones that stuck. I was not able to adhere to the program after that show.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I wanted, to highlight for everybody listening here is, we are carnivore coaches, but we also coach people that are not carnivores, right? Like,
yeah,
I am pretty open to all dietary types of choices, and I think you have to kind of meet people wherever they're at in improving where they can at the time. So, Haley pulled off those prep in the past, but now we can look at this prep here, the one that we just did in a carnivore sense, and see a lot of stark differences. So I think it's really important for everybody out there to understand, like, you can pull off similar results doing a lot of different things. I mean, there's a different dietary choice for every person. And this comes down to even carnivore, right? Like, all of you carnivores listening that know other carnivores, I guarantee you they're not eating the same exact way you do. They're not eating the exact same times. They're not eating the exact same amounts. They're not doing diet is an individual thing, and it really becomes a tool to figure out what that is for you and how that works best for you. And some people struggle with starting right out the gate. We've talked on previous episodes how to start a carnivore diet, how to get in the groove and everything, but realistically it's not black and white. There is I'm on and then I'm on. There has to be the blend of figuring out what works for you and what works best. And even if something does work best, right, and you think you got it down, all you out here listening that are not carnivores, which is really my goal. I want a lot of you people that are not carnivores listening to this show to get the idea. Maybe it's worth an experiment. Maybe it's worth a trial. Maybe it's worth, okay, I feel good now. I feel great doing what I've been doing. I did pull off a good prep. I have dieted. I've done all these things. But what's the difference if you go carnivore for a bit, right? And that's the whole point of what we have tried to exemplify with this show and with the prep and doing the quote-unquote impossible, if you will, as everybody decided to blatantly try to tell us online for literally however many months it's been now. But realistically, looking at the prep and the differences, I'll give you guys a coaching perspective, right? So Haley went into the athlete side of it. I was Haley's coach for both of these preps, and, carnivore prep, I mean, she had a lot of questions, but that's because, again, first time she's done it, right? Like we talked about that. That's something you want to do when you start a new dietary choice. All of you out there, hopefully the reason you're watching this is either you're carnivore and you're trying to figure it out and you want to learn more, or you're thinking about it, right? You got to be studying, you got to be learning, So Haley was asking a lot of questions about carnivore. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Right. And I've coached carnivores before. I've coached carnivores, for years, honestly, ever since this became a thing. And before that, there's people that were doing very similar types of diets that I was working with back then. So luckily I was able to blend those things into this bodybuilding world, because we are kind of, in a lot of ways. Very few people in the world doing it at this point, but hopefully more. However, previous prep with Haley on carbs was definitely Haley's questions this time were much more about, like, okay, I want to understand. I know what I'm doing it. I want to understand more about it. Versus before, I could say the prior preps, a lot of the questions maybe were more about, having a harder time with compliance, having a harder time staying on it. Like, is this how I'm supposed to feel? Am I supposed to feel this bad? Am I supposed to feel? And that is the effect of, why you hear a lot in bodybuilding. People, it becomes a consensus, unfortunately, which is not really my belief, but it becomes a consensus that bodybuilding has to be miserable. Prep has to be miserable. Prep has to suck. Every single hour of every single day that you're in prep, everything in your life has to suffer, right? Like you hate the cardio, you hate the diet, you hate everything about it, but you're doing it for the prep. And when it's over, then you do go into the modes that Haley previously did, right? And that's, again, considered pretty normal. Like, it is a normal thing to almost be
Binge.
okay with having a binge eating habit, right? Like, I know there's girls, for example, that I've seen on Instagram and stuff that literally get a box together and they save up all the little treats that they didn't eat on prep that they're gonna eat after, right? They start building a box full of Reese's and M&Ms,
and then they eat it,
Oreos.
And they'll eat till they barf. You hear about like these girls are they're backstage and it's like you've dieted down so low, and then they have these like half-pound brownies and they're just eating them backstage, and it's because you're so deprived, and then they just like it's a crazy aspect of the sport.
It is, yes.
It's a crazy ritual that happens after bodybuilding shows.
Yeah, and it is one that sets people back. I mean, it is not uncommon to see competitors that achieve great condition, great shape, great proportion, even great placings, go off and gain 20, 30 pounds within the first couple of weeks of their show. And so, then you start to look at the factor of, okay, when does bodybuilding, obviously we know there's certain aspects of sports that are not necessarily, quote unquote, healthy at the top level, but when does it get so far away from health that it actually becomes a detriment? And that is, unfortunately, a lot of bodybuilding, right? But where I was going with this statement was really more so like, I didn't feel like we got into those zones at all doing the carnivore prep. And I would say I probably pushed you on the level of what you had to do training wise, cardio wise, even dietary wise, due to the restriction of carnivore, right? Just eating ribeyes, literally. It's probably double what we had to do at any prior time. It could be more, right? Like, you had to do double the effort, really, in the sense of what I created for you, because I knew you had the capacity to be able to do it, versus prior, where we were checking all the same boxes, but it was not at that intensity because you just simply couldn't get to it, right?
I couldn't do it,
That's the biggest thing I noticed that was a huge difference here. So let's talk a little bit about your carnivore prep. We have talked a bit about it a little on the show, so if you guys want, more like in the moment where Haley was at the time, go listen to the previous episodes. But let's talk just overall, right? We know there was a little bit of an adaptation phase in the beginning for you to get into. And then, I think where we left off in previous episodes is we kind of just hit the stride point, right? We went away from the lion diet at some point there, and then we kind of came back to it. What changed in the last, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks with the carnivore prep that we really dialed in on, to get you ready, Haley?
Yeah. Like, what changed within the prep, or like what was the difference between the carnivore prep and the carb prep?
Either or both, whatever you want.
Either both. Okay.
We're just.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So both, like, in stark contrast to the carb prep, like where I was very bingey and food focused and had a hard time with adherence. Like Ryan was saying, it was the complete opposite. It was like I wasn't ever wanting or needing more food. My food was incredibly satisfying, you guys. Like, before, I was eating like tilapia and rice cakes and just, you're eating foods that do not actually fuel your body, but it's like the bodybuilding foods, right? Or like plain chicken dipped in mustard with white rice. And it's like, where is the nutrients? Where is the fat? You're literally like, your brain is starved, your hormones are starved, your body is starved. Whereas this whole prep, I was eating fatty steaks, fatty ground beef, everything cooked in fat, bacon, eggs. And during the prep, we shifted these things, right? We experimented the whole time. Like, all right, let's do the lion diet. Let's just do steaks. Let's cut out eggs. Let's cut out dairy. Let's add in bacon. Let's take out bacon. Like there were a lot of fluctuations throughout, but never once was I like, Ryan, I really need a refeed. Constantly on my carb prep, I was like, when do I get a free meal? I need a free meal. Like I'm dying slowly. There was never even an inkling of that on this prep. I don't even think I once asked for more food this prep. It was always just like, what am I eating it, feeling good, essentially. Now, the last 4 weeks of prep, I would say the last month, no matter what you're eating, you're very depleted, you're lower body fat. Naturally, when you get into very low body fat, you will have more anxiety. This is just a survival mechanism of the body being like, hey, if we keep going this way, we're not gonna do too well, right? Like if you keep losing body fat and that never stops, you end up in the hospital, right? But obviously bodybuilding, there is a stop point. So like your brain knows it, your body kind of, you start to feel a little shitty, you start to feel a little cold, you start to like have mood swings, you can be more irritable. Carb preps, that was all over the place. I was really struggling. This prep, even me and my husband, he was like, wow, like this is so night and day different. Like we could not believe how good I felt up close to the show. I would say more so the pressures that I felt from this show was more a desire to do well. Whereas previous shows, I didn't really care. It was more like just make it to this stage. Whereas now I had the capacity to care about how I did because I could put in the effort. So any stress that came from these shows was more just like wanting to do well, but it wasn't so much like the training, right? And I was actually in a place where I was like, Ryan, give me more cardio if you think I need more cardio. Give me more workouts. Like I can do it. I can handle it. Let's go as far as we can possibly go. Let's push my body to places it's never gone before. Which never in a million years I've ever said that to Ryan, right? Like I've never been like, Ryan, give me more cardio if you think I need it. And so this prep was very different in how I felt emotionally, how my body operated. I was able to wake up every morning and hit my workouts. I had way more energy. I was not food focused. And even backstage at shows, the way that I talked about prep and the way I felt about show day was very different than the girls around me. You know, the girls were talking about how they'd only been eating tilapia. They were very low fat. They had lost their periods. There were a lot of, some girls were crying from the stress. Some girl, everybody was talking about what they're going to eat after the show. And people were like, what did you eat today? Are you so sick of fish? And I'm like, girl, I've been eating steak the whole time. And they're like, what? Like just shocked, like could not believe it. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Steak is my meal tonight. I'm so ready for fatty meats. And I'm like, that's all I've been eating is fat and meat. And then they're like, what are you going to eat tonight? And I was like, more fatty meat, you guys. I feel great. Like, so that, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like that's like a million differences between the carnivore prep and the carb prep. And even just noticing the difference in me backstage to other women backstage. And some women are great, you know what I mean? But you can tell, I mean, you're dieted down, you're stressed out. Some women, it's just hard. I mean, bodybuilding's hard. You're really depleted. You're performing at your leanest on your show day. And so it was just crazy. Like people could not believe backstage when I was like, yeah, I mean, I had steak cooked in fat this, for the last 9 months. Like I never once cut out the fat. Like I was always very high fat. And there was a very big, like, oh my gosh, how did you do that factor? You know what I mean? Like how, like, cause the standard bodybuilding diet is high fat or high carb, low fat. And we just feel better with more fats. Like that's just a fact. Like high fat diets, all of the most studies have been done on the keto diet and how good it is for you. And that's a high fat, high protein diet,
Yeah, and that's, the kind of the part that I wanted to echo with that is that, it really is the same exact thing, but totally different results in the way that you approach it, just based on changing your food choices, which is very interesting to think about that, right? Because like, a lot of people are afraid to start carnivore. A lot of people are afraid to try it. I mean, it is still, and you know this better than anyone, Haley, because your page is all carnivore, this, that. It is still very much a taboo thing, if you will, in the world, right?
Yeah.
Like people think it is so strange. Yet, like when Haley decided she wanted to do this and we were going to do a carnivore prep, I mean, I was like, yeah, cool, we can do it. I mean, I remember you asking me, like, is that even yes, we can do it, right? And it's not
Yeah.
really a thing that's massively done, but we could do it because I know, the principles of nutrition are so simple yet so complicated, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
literally, there is so much about nutrition that we do not know or understand, and then there's so much about it that, we went on for years and years believing was the answer. And so many of those things have been thrown away and changed now. And there's just, the real highlight of the fact that if you can be compliant and you can do a diet and you feel good doing it, that means that you're going to be successful more than likely, right? And obviously, when we talk about bodybuilding, it is not. I wanted to highlight it like this because people listening that are not bodybuilders, not competitors, whatever, you probably think this sounds very extreme and almost unhealthy in a lot of ways, what we're talking about. And really it is, okay? Because you
Yeah.
have to understand, getting to a prep physique on comp day, it's almost like a marathoner who's running a marathon. You don't run a marathon every single day, because if you did, you would know right away, like, oh, this person's, that's not healthy. That's not going to be good for them. That's not going to work. That's the same with bodybuilding. A competition is your marathon in a way, right? Like, that is
Yeah,
the
it
day that
is.
you've trained for, you've led up to, and you do it that day, but you don't do the same thing. So, the level of leanness that Haley gets to, the amount of muscle, all these different things, there's a different season now that we go to after the show.
Yeah.
We go into a different phase where, granted, Team Flex, the way that I believe in doing prep and the way that I coach and the way we all coach is very, very much in the healthiest of ways, right? Like, we do not do the things that so many other coaches do: crash diet people, damage their hormones, damage their metabolism, do whatever it takes to get to the trophy, right? I don't
Yeah.
believe in that. We don't do that. But there
No.
are still going to be, again, effects of, dieting for a long period of time, doing a lot of cardio for a long period of time, training very intensely with weights for a long period of time. So you really do need to think of bodybuilding not in the sense like it's a luxury fun thing. It's a sport. And so when you go to game day, which is your competition day, that is the result of that day, and that's what you need to do. And then you go focus on the other variables after the fact, and go back into other. It's just like every sport, right? Anybody pick any of your favorite sports. That those athletes are not training. The athletes that just went to the Olympics are not training like they're going to have the Olympics in a week, 365 days a year, right? They
Yeah.
have different phases of training. They have different. So again, all sports have these things. So if you're listening to us and you're like, whoa, these guys are crazy talking about low calories, getting lean, and all this. No, it's really just more so to say that you have to understand how that fits into your role. And if that's not your goal, that doesn't matter. Then you don't have to get to that point. However, all the same principles do apply. And so, like Haley's talking about, mainly if we compare these two things, a lot of the same modality, right? Still did cardio, still did training, still did dieting, still had to do all these things for a certain period of time. The real difference becomes, though, how compliant could you be and how easy was it to be compliant, right? And I'll tell you what, the number
Yeah.
one reason that people fail on preps and things of that nature are due to lack of compliance with their diet, right? Like they have a hard time being compliant on prep, and that's really what the issue becomes. They fall off the diet. This is why so many people have failed diets over time as well, right? Any type of diet. How many times have people tried to lose? Oh, I got 30 pounds to lose. I got 20 pounds to lose. And they try for 10, 15 years and they never even get to the point, right? It's, again, because of the fact that you can't, your dietary choice, you can't be compliant with it. You can't stay with it. A lot of diets are just simply designed to be like, okay, quick results, you feel good. Now you can't maintain it though, and you go right back. And this is why, real stat, 95% of people that diet
Mm-hmm.
fail. When you look at them in the long term, they fail in the long term. They go back. Will Haley? I don't know. We'll find out, right? But so far, things are going pretty good. So Haley, let's talk a little bit about the results of your competition now, because we've been hopefully weeding people along here for like 35 minutes. Thank you guys for listening. If you made it, subscribe, pay attention. We got more coming. Now, bring us to comp day first, and then we'll talk a little bit about peak week and what that means and why. But what happened comp day? Because it was a little bit of a crazy situation where, it wasn't even specifically the competition we planned, maybe, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what happened was about, like 2 weeks before my show, I did a check in and Ryan was like, well, the work is done. You're essentially ready. Now we can coast into the show. And I was like, what if we did a local show? And as like a practice show. Let's just go, no pressure, see what we can do better, what we can fix. And so we ended up throwing in a extra show before the Vegas show that I just did 2 days ago. And yeah, show day, I mean, it was great. I felt really good. I had steak the morning of. I had steak, before prejudging and finals. What happens is you go on stage, you do your posing routine, you're in your suit, you have to do specific poses, you have to look a certain way. You're judged, you are placed amongst the other girls that you're competing against, and then you take a break, and then you go back for finals and you get your awards. And the show, I feel like it went really well. It was a huge success. I did have a smaller class that show, but I won that class. And then in the overall lineup of all the girls, I got fourth, which was great. So still beat some more girls. It was a amazing show. The girls who placed top 3 in the overall were very experienced competitors. They had done multiple national shows. They were there to get re-nationally qualified. Like, it was just an amazing experience. The women were amazing. The athletes really showed up, to win. And so it was just an amazing competition all around, because you're showing up and there's girls there that look phenomenal. So I came away from that show, we did it. We did a carnivore prep, stepped on stage. I was lean enough. I placed, did well in the overall lineup. We proved, very quickly that you can do a carnivore prep and you can do it well. So it was a success for sure.
Yep, definitely a success. And the impossible has been done, folks. Once again,
Yeah.
and, it's funny because it was funny because after you posted about that, there was zero. I didn't see any people that all of a sudden, all of the comments from the haters for the months that, oh, this is impossible. You'll never do it. You can't do it. You need carbs. I didn't see one of them. So it's interesting
None
to
of
see
them.
how they come
Crickets.
out when the time, because they saw it. But anyway,
Of course.
so Haley then went on to do another event and placed again, top 5 there. So again, another successful. That's 2 back-to-back. We'll talk a little bit more about the peak week stuff. But what I want to say here is, for those of you listening that are a competitor, okay, obviously now we've hammered the point, right? That, okay, you can do it, but why is it beneficial? That's what I really want to get into a little bit of, right? Like, because I want to contest with some competitors that, dare I say, those of you out there that are pulling off successful preps, if you did a carnivore prep, would you be better? Because I'll tell you guys what, I've been coaching Haley a long time, right? And this is by far Haley's best to stage in many, many, many ways. Like, there's almost not a single way that you could say anything was ever even close to what she pulled off with these events here, as far as physique goes, as far as mentality goes, as far as result goes, as far as all that goes. There is a massive difference when you choose food that gives you proper nutrition versus food that, maybe doesn't. And that is unfortunately a huge part of bodybuilding, right? Like, I was thinking about this the other day. I forget where I was at, maybe Target or something, I don't know. And I happened to just walk by something, and it was like protein Cheetos or something weird, like protein cheese ball Cheetos that were like in the health and fitness section or something, next to the protein shakes, whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is where we're at these days now. Now we got protein Cheetos, right?
Yeah.
And what's funny is that, it was like almost like destiny. I don't know. Some point later, I was on Instagram and I saw some competitor, I don't know who it was eating those exact protein Cheetos as part of their prep diet.
Yeah, to hit their protein goals.
Yeah.
And I'm like, not only are you putting your body through this insane training, but now, if we looked at your food logs, how much of what you're consuming is actually benefiting your body in a real, nutrient-dense, life-giving, brain-supporting, organ-functioning support health way. Yep. So you're taking, bodybuilding, which we've said is already an extreme sport. It's an extreme sport. And extreme sports, they all go through a phase where it's not the healthiest, right? Nobody does bodybuilding because they want to live like a really balanced lifestyle. Right. You know what I mean? Right. Nobody's like, oh, I'm achieving peak health. Let's go do a bodybuilding competition. You do it for the sake of the sport, for the love of the sport, the love of the competition. And it's for people who want that kind of extreme competitive outlet. And so you take this very extreme sport and you're dieting down, you're putting all of this stress on your body, and then now you're eating, the standard bodybuilding, high carb, low fat, moderate protein diet. And when you look at the diet of the vast majority of competitors, it's like their food is garbage.
Yeah.
They're trying to make BS fit their macros because you're so like food addicted. You're like, oh my gosh, I'll do anything I can to make this Reese's cup fit my macros. So now you've tanked 200 calories out of your like 1,400 calorie whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're eating rice cakes, which what even is a rice cake? You know what I mean? And then you're eating all of this other garbage. And then we come over here and you look at a carnivore prep and it's like everything I'm eating is 100% whole foods, is 100% high quality protein. I'm not drinking protein shakes. I'm not eating any of this stuff. And I could see in every aspect of my life, from like my hormone health, my thyroid health, mind you, my doctors know that I'm eating carnivore. My doctors know that I do bodybuilding. I take blood work for all of these things. We monitor all of these things. They are in support. I stayed healthy throughout the whole time. I would say way healthier than like how I was my previous preps.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm eating like real food. And I could see how much it positively benefited me, even in still a really high stress, high octane sport. Everything was better. Like mood, hormones, cycle, everything was better on carnivore.
Right.
Even like food addiction, I would never had like a weird food. I never had like a weird food, like scrolling, watching,
Which again is normal. That's a normal behavior in
yeah.
our sport.
Yeah, it's a normal thing in bodybuilding. You're so restricted. You fantasize about food. You're watching all of these food blogs. I did it my first two shows. I've talked to other competitors. We bonded over it. It's a thing. And then even the girls backstage were joking about how their explore pages were all food. And then for me, it's like I just genuinely didn't have that. And it was mind blowing to break past that in a bodybuilding prep and to just be like, wow, I feel good, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even when I didn't feel good, it was never as shitty as past preps. It was still like, wow, I feel really good for how dieted down I am,
Yeah. I think I lost you there for a second on that last one.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying I felt really good for even how dieted down I was. Like even if I didn't feel the best because it's still bodybuilding, I still felt way better than I had in past carb preps.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say too. Is like, it's funny because coaching Haley on this one, right? Like, she had a few moments. Prep is hard. Don't get me wrong, you guys.
Yeah.
Prep is hard, but her moments were nowhere near any of the moments prior, and really they were not around. Again, these things of like severe this and that is happening. It was not like I need to go off the plan, right? Like, which is what happens a lot to people. I mean, I coach plenty of other competitors. I've coached many, many competitors over the years. And there is a certain normalcy of prep where things become difficult and it is challenging and is hard, and that exists, right? And don't get me wrong, this did not vanish because Haley went carnivore. She's still going to have those. That's normal. That's a normal part of achieving any goal. So those of you out there that are having a hard time sticking to a carnivore diet or even anything like that, again, normal. But again, it's your choice to be able to eat the things that you want to eat, to be able to compel that and, be able to attain your goals, whatever they may be. So the prep itself, was a lot easier. And, it was definitely a time that I felt like we were able to push the envelope of what you could actually do versus what we could do with what we could do at the time. You get what I'm saying? Right? Like, that's how previous preps had worked. Like, okay, here's what Haley can do right here based on where she's at, which again is everybody in the sport, right? And Haley's goals only get harder from here, folks, right? This is one season and now we are done with that season. We're moving on. Next, we'll be training for nationals, doing other things. We're going to do a part 2 episode also where we're going to go in a lot more into Haley's next goals and what we're doing with carnivore there. But, really her goals only get more difficult. So stay tuned, and I'm sure we'll probably get some more haters that are saying, hey, that's not possible. You can't do that. Let's see. Well, we'll see what happens in the future. But really what I want everybody listening so far to take home here is, right, like you should consider, again, what I've said every episode. I think you should maybe do a carnivore experiment. Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
try it? Why wouldn't you just give it a go? So many people talk about it and they've never even tried it. I see big name people talk about it, right? Like people with huge followings that, they do the same stuff we do. They coach people, they do whatever, they write books, they do whatever. And they have never tried it, yet they're first in line to go talk bad about it and everything else too, right? But how do you actually justify saying things you say if you've never actually done it? And that's what I would invite everybody here listening to kind of play with in your head, right? Like what would maybe happen? Is it possible that, if you did go carnivore and you tried an experiment, that it may change things positively for you? And then, you know what? Here's the other thing. If it doesn't, go back. No, again,
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here telling you what to do with your life and your diet. I'm giving you ideas and hopefully, some motivation to try new things, to further optimize, to figure out what makes you the best. I mean, that's really the goal with everything that we do as coaches. That's like what we try to do for people. And, it might be something that's worth trying to do a carnivore experiment and see what happens. Because, Haley has said to me, how long was the first timeline that you committed to with this diet, Haley?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. And now where are we at? How long has it been now?
Isn't it? It's like 9 months now.
Yeah, 9 months. And we always
like 9 months.
We always went into this, folks, with the idea that, it was going to be minimum 8 weeks and maybe no more than that. Yet here it is.
Yeah.
And we're still going. The experiment continues. Haley's got exciting new goals we'll cover in part 2 of this episode. But really what I want to make known, again, like, you guys just try it. Somebody try it. Competitors try it. It's funny because like the end of prep for most competitors anyway is carnivore done wrong, right? Like hopefully people are still listening, but like people cut out all these other foods. They cut out vegetables. They cut out the processed foods. They cut out their protein shakes. They cut out their supplements, and then they go eat like straight lean chicken breast or white fish. It's almost carnivore, but it's done wrong. You're doing it wrong. And that's how you're achieving your peak condition, right? So like, what would happen if you did it right? And what would happen if you did it from the start? What would happen in the vast majority of being able to do a prep that wasn't miserable all the time, that you could actually be compliant with, that you could actually push yourself to the max on, and then seeing what that does over time? That's a very interesting thought. And, I want to see if anybody, let's just give away a couple spots. 1 month to 5 people listening that are competitors. If you made it this far, I don't know how we'll pick you. Comment on the video. We'll pick you. And we'll let you come try out a month training with me or Haley, probably Haley. And we'll coach you. We'll show you what a carnivore bodybuilding looks like. Carnivore competing looks like. If you want to be a competitor or you already are, try it. Do the experiment and do it with us, right? Like, see what it's like, and we'll show you. 5 of you. Comment down below. Make sure you subscribe. You're watching. And as I said, we got part 2. Haley, do you want to give anybody any hints on what we're going to talk about in part 2? Is it equally as crazy, or is it equally nuts? And we also have a lot of questions too. We're going to cover in episode 2, you guys. So if you have questions about Haley's carnivore, prep, her carnivore experience, comment those too, because she already has a list that we'll cover in the next episode, but we'll bring more into the party. But Haley, give people a little hint. What's going to happen next in the crazy carnivore world that is you?
Like, what are the next goals? Should I just?
Yes.
We're going to talk about how we're now going to go into a building season carnivore, which a lot of people are like, you can't build muscle without carbs. So the carnivore experiment continues. And to make it even harder, we are going to stack those goals with marathon training. I am training for my first half marathon. So we have a few different things happening here. People say you can't build muscle and you cannot train for marathons at the same time. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do it without carbs.
Do it while being a carnivore. So if you guys want to follow along.
Going crazy.
It only gets crazier for here.
Yeah, it really does. We did our first test today. I ran 2 miles today. We've already started the marathon training. I'm actually going to weight lift after this because we're doing both. So
Yep.
that is what we'll cover next week.
Yes, it'll be very exciting. And again, let's see. Haters pop up. Hit me in the comments if you think it's impossible. I can't wait to read it. Please let me know. And then I'll show you something in a little while. Haley's going to show you something in a little while too. All right, that's what we do, you guys. So make sure you're following along, hanging out with us. We got episode 2 coming right up, and we'll be back. Thanks for listening.